Hi, Kelly here with kidsquidstudios with a quick tip tutorial on how to create and render vectors. So the first step that we're going to do is to create still vectors, and we're going to do that in Corel, but you can do it in any art editing software, really. And it's going to be the same procedures. The names are pretty much going to be the same, especially the rendering process. So we're not going to do anything complex or artful. We're just going to do a quick thing. We're going to do some letters and some lines and stuff, and then we're going to render those into vectors. And then after we have those vectors rendered, we're going to pull them up in Hitfilm, which is the video editor that I use. But once again, you can use any video editor. The procedures are going to be the same. The names, the rendering process, everything is going to be the same. So once we're in Hitfilm, we're going to animate these vectors simply. We're not going to do a bunch of animations. We're going to do some animations, do a soundscape for them, and render it so that way it's a usable movie vector as well. Because if you render it regular, it's an MP4 and it's got a solid background as opposed to that see-through background that you want with a vector, but you want it to be a movie. So how do you get those two to do? Okay, so let's get started. This is Hitfilm. So let's go ahead and pull up Corel. 1080p is fine for the background, which is 1920 by 1080. So what I recommend is every time you start a project that has a new dimensioned background, save that dimension as a template for yourself, so that way you can always just click standard, or like that's what 1080p is standard, right? And you have 1080p. I also have Instagram posts, which is 1800 by 1350, and 4K. So that way 4K is just sitting there and I can make a 4K project like that without having to type it in and play around. So I recommend doing templates. Templates are always a time saver. We're going to start with a vector background like always. Okay, let's go ahead and create a raster layer, which is the top down here where it says new layer. Go ahead and name things so that way you know what the hell you're working with all the time. So what is this? This is just going to be letters. So obviously over here in the left-hand column, you've got a bunch of tools. You come down to the T, which is your text tool, and just slowly work through your tools until you're familiar with all of the tools and all the sub-tools and the tools and how to use them for the most part. Utilizing all of these parameters at the top, really get familiar with that. And the easiest way to do that is to just keep doing projects, using as many of the parameters as you can figure out how to use. But for today, we're keeping it quick and simple, so just GH, and let's highlight it with the Control A, which is select everything in just about every program on the face of the planet. Now that we've got it highlighted, we can change the font color to like this with the black that highlights the gradations, or you can change it to a specific color or whatever you want. I like gradients, they're always fun. Let's see, we got blue hues, cloudy days. Let's do this guy. That looks cool. Yeah, that looks fun. If you want it bigger or smaller, we're at 11. Let's make it 18. That's better. There, that's fine. Now we're going to change our tool back to the pointer. Now you can drag it to the center. So then you want to come up here to Objects, Align, and give the vertical center, back to Objects, Align, Horizontal center. Okay, so now it's in the center of your vector, and we can render this. This is perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up another project real quick before we move on and render that guy. We're just going to do some simple little lines or something, okay? Let's grab a paintbrush and a color. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to make a couple of lines here. So I made this nice thick line here with the fuzzy edges, like somebody had went by with a can of paint and, went across the board. And we're going to use that as another layer. So let's go ahead and make a third layer. I lied, we're going to make 3. And this last layer, same thing, 1080p. We're going to grab some more words, and it'll be vector. Highlight that. Resize it down to like 8. We'll change our font to this weird, I don't even know what you call it, doesn't matter. Pick any font. And that means that we can now center it. Now we get to render it. And make sure to set up your file system so that way you can find these vectors that you're creating, okay? We'll start with this one right here. All right, let's render these poor guys. Save is not what you're after here. You want export, okay? And you'll have JPEG, GIF, or PNG. What we're after here is a PNG, because PNGs allow you to have see-through backgrounds. Now you're presented with this menu. Okay, so on this menu, the first one, I always use the 24-bit, which means that you don't have to mess with any of the other parameters. And then we go to the second tab, and we have no transparency, which means that your vector will be on a white background, and it won't be see-through, or single color transparency, which is usually what it defaults to. And there are benefits and deficits to using either the single color transparency or the alpha channel transparency. So when you use one or the other, the best way to figure out which one you want is to actually zoom in on your project and scoot around. So you see how the edge here has this little gradation, and the gradation's here as well. Let's go and center that. If we change it to single color transparency, which is its original format, right? You see now it's all janky and it's got this as opposed to a nice soft edge. With certain pieces, that this setting might actually work better for you. But for this particular project and this particular kind of image, you want to use the alpha channel content, which allows that gradation of transparency to be in the render. And you hit OK. And this is where the organization of everything really gets important. So like in this case, I've got vector movie Dropbox, a Dropbox for this movie that we're making right now. So I can find these things. So I open up that, and this is the word vector. So it's going to be a vector called vector. And enter. So now, before you close anything or do anything, always double check that it did what you told it to do by opening up the file system. Here's our vector movie Dropbox, and we can see it in there. If we take this PNG that we've just made and we pull it back into Corel, it should be a vector, which it is. Yay! And that's how you double check. Make sure that your vector is a vector. And we can close this. We're done with this one. No, I don't need to change. No, it's okay. So we'll call this spray can. We do the same procedure again. You go into the file, you go down to export, not save, and click PNG. And once again, double check the transparency tab, and you're on alpha channel transparency. But let's go ahead and see once again what happens if you use single color. See, it looks all sharper, but that's because they've gotten rid of all of the grays. Let's go to the edge here. See, like, this is a good example where you only see the whites and the blacks, none of the grays, none of the gradation. And that is really solid out here. And depending on the product that you're making in the end, you might want this very solid delineation between the white and the black and not having any kind of gradations because of the product you're making in the end. But for this, I want it to look like real spray and to be multiple grays. Boom. And we double check our file system again. Always never forget that. And you double check by pulling it back over into your project, and boom, it is a vector. Close that. We've got two pieces. Let's go and do that third one real fast. So let's go ahead and just take a look. Yeah, jankified. Yes, jankification is a highly technical term, and it's real. So we're in here, and we're calling it GH. and you double check by dragging it back in, and it is a vector. And we can move on with the experiment, which means that we can close down all of the Corel projects. Goodbye, Corel. And say hello to Hitfilm, or any video editor that you are working with. Okay, we're dropping these 3 pieces into our project. Okay, first things first, you want to start a composite shot instead of trying to make it all out here. So that way you can animate it all together on one project. Because if you try to animate one of these, you're gonna not be able to see any of the other layers while you're doing so. So let's go ahead and start a composite shot. We will call it Vector Project Man. Let's go ahead and grab our parts and parcels, which is our GHGH, our stripe, and our word vector. I'm also going to bring in a black plane and a white plane. So we're going to use our white background to be able to do the layout and design. So obviously I don't like the order here, so let's change the order. We'll bring the GHGH down below the spray can. We'll bring the vector word above the spray can. Let's go and make a duplicate of the spray can, and we will bring it below the GHGH. And now we're all set up to do our work. And instead of grabbing the layers over here, try to grab your layers from the menu on the left. We're moving the word vector down. You're going to hold Control and click the second file you want to move. Drag them down and resize. Resize. Now let's grab the word vector and resize it. And we're going to grab the spray can that is on top of the GHGH, not the spray can that's underneath. We'll grab the one that's on top and bring its transparency down a bit. How we're going to do that is opening it up, going to transform, and its opacity. And we can just click and drag left and watch what's happening and decide how much to leave on there. See, I want it to still allow the vector to pop. There we go, perfect. While still having an effect on the GHGH. All right, now we've got this layout, design, everything's going great. Okay, now that we've got this going on, we're gonna animate these elements, because that's the whole point. So what I normally do is like I think of a rhythm, and I'm like, so 1, 2. It should be on screen now. So we're looking at the GHGH only right now. And we're putting an automation dot right here after that 1, 2. That's when it should be fully on the screen. So we put the automation dot at 100. We drag it back to the beginning. We put it back to 0. Boom. You're done. You hit play. And it appears. Whoopee! Because this is the end product. So that's usually how I start this, is by creating the end product and then making animations backwards, kind of, to figure out how to get it to that end product. Let's just go ahead and move forward. See, this is like 2 seconds, so that way now we can measure and say that's like 1 second. So I want more of a ch. And we'll open up the darker spray can that's underneath of everything and automate it first, because it's easier to see. So we want the spray can to be finished by this point in time, right? So instead of doing an opacity thing where the whole thing appears and disappears, we're going to do a mask instead, which makes it look like somebody's actually spraying it on there solid as it goes. You come down here and you click mask, right? So that way we can create a mask layer. And we're going to put the mask all the way around this object, and it makes it appear again. Now we're going to automate the shape of the mask that we just created so that it's flat like this on itself, and then it's going to open up, revealing the black line. What we need to decide is from which direction. I say the person went down with their hand, not up with their hand like that. So we'll make it go from this side to that side. So we're going to go to transform inside of the mask. We're transforming the mask, not the actual image. So we're going to go ahead and unlink the scales locking mechanism, which means these will move together or separate. So you want them to move separate from one another. So we have this measurement laid out from the GHGH's timeline. Use the other things' timelines to measure the timeline of something that you want. Okay, so now we come down to the spray can that's the darkest underneath. We're going to put an automation dot on scale and position, and they're going to be automatically in the time of the rhythm that I want after the GHGH appears. So this is the end product. Now we can go back to where the GHGH had just finished being populated, right? And right when it's finished, this spray can goes across. So it's already sprayed across down here. Now we need to tell it where to start by position and scale. And we can change our tool from the mask tool to the pointer tool. And as we move the pointer, right, see how it reveals it? It's great, right? We'll grab the center one and we'll make it go like that, all the way down to nothing. And then we'll move its position all the way to the side. To check the animation nicely, we can move forward frame by frame. That's nice. So now we have a GHGH and the black line appearing, the darker one. A little too fast? No problem. What we can do is now drag these automation dots to change how fast or slow things happen. So now it should go at about the same speed that the GHGH had appeared. Nice. Maybe a little faster. Good enough for our experiment today, which is how to render these things. But, you know, how to create them too is helpful. Now let's just have the vector, bam, appear, right? And then jump like we stamped it into the paint. So it goes shh, and then a second breath, like a half of a second breath. Let's find vector, that's our top guy. And we're going to open up its capabilities and go to transform again, right? To make it just appear the way we want, we put a dot on the opacity and it creates a dot, and we're going to go backwards one frame and bring it to 0, and within one frame it appears. We also want it to sink down on the next frame, so let's go ahead and do our scale. Automation dot at that same point. We go forward one frame. We bring it down one, go forward one frame, and bring it back up. So now we should have a vector appear, shrink, and come back up. Now let's scroll in here and look at these so that way we can time it better. Now it happens too quick, huh? So what we can do is we can scoot these out and try to keep them at an even flow. Even flow. There we go. Nice little oonka. Yeah, that's nice. New. We've only got one layer left to deal with, and that is the almost transparent layer. So how do we want that to come on to the screen? We have the first and the then. Ooh, we can have it look like it bleeds through. Let's see if that looks cool. Right there, that it bleeds in right there. So now that we're at the end of what we want, and here's the spray can, and so we put the opacity dot here because it's set at 68 already. So we want it to go from 0 to 68. Now let's look at our timing. That thing goes boom, boom, and between there and there, it happens. Eh. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now that we've got this animated vector thing going on, we can get rid of the white background. So we drop it into the project and we can watch it. Boom, boom, boom. Very beautiful. Let's go ahead and throw a couple of sound effects on here, which shouldn't take but a second. Yeah. So let's go ahead and duplicate this so that way we can layer them on top of each other, move them apart. I can move these two separately. Okay, so I cut the end of the first one off and brought the second half of the second one back toward the beginning till the one bam happens on the letters and the second bam happens on the spray. And now we need the fa-dump, which let's go ahead and open up the vector one to see where the ba-dump happens, right? Ba-dump. Ooh, there's that one where it sounds like ba-dump, ba-dump. It's like a tunnel. Where is that tunnel? So, do we want the ba-dump or the tink? Ba-dump. Or boom. I say the tunnel echo would sound better. Better, 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 better. What? Let's get rid of the second boom. Alrighty, guys. I think we've got a full-fledged animated vector with sound. Now let's go back to the editor and watch it in here. Now that the sound is coming to an end, we can find the end of our project here by putting automation dots on the opacity of the whole thing and bringing it down and waiting for the music. Yeah. Yeah, nice. All right. All together now. Okie dokie, now that we've got the animated vector with sound, we can go ahead and render it. Add it to the export queue. Instead of rendering this as an MP4, you want to go to an uncompressed with alpha, whatever the file format. This is AVI, so you want an uncompressed AVI with alpha. This is going to be a slightly larger piece of footage, but you won't have to have that whole project inside of your template in order to have these vectors at your disposal. You can make these vectors that are animated with sound and all of these things going on and have them to just throw down anytime you want. Let's get rendering, and we'll call it Vector Project, man. All right, guys, this should only take but a second. Now, don't get freaked out. When you watch these vectors on your computer, sometimes your computer can't really play it the way it is. It's really confused. It doesn't like playing vectors. So if we watch it, it might get glitchy. Watch. Yeah. The reason it's doing that is because you're trying to play a vector on your regular computer and the movie player's like, what the hell are you doing? What is that? Please don't think that the file is corrupted or anything. There's nothing wrong with it. And you're like, but it's not playing right. So grab that file that you just made, that movie, right? That AVI, bring it back into your project. And you'll see that it plays just fine. And even if it doesn't play fine in here, watch. It's beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. Now that you've taken it and brought it back in here and you put it on your timeline, now render this piece as an MP4 and you will see that everything is just fine. And we'll call it the same thing, except for it's not an AVI anymore. It's just an MP4. Dot. And once again, should only take but a second. Hey. So, Vector Man MP4. See? Works just fine. It's just the fact that it was trying to play a vector. But when you make it into an MP4, you see, it's perfect. I hope this was helpful. I hope you enjoyed making vectors in Corel or whatever art studio you're working in, making them into an animated vector, putting sound on there, and now you should have this tool at your disposal to be able to create either still vectors or animated vectors. And I hope you're able to deploy this technique anytime you want, which is really the goal, to be able to just do these things second nature. And honestly, that's really good looking. And you can put that in the corner of any movie and it will just be right on top. No background, no nothing. It'll look really nice. So I hope this helped. I hope you guys had a good time making vectors in Corel, learning how to export them so that way you can use vectors at your willy-nilly, and then being able to pull them up in a movie editor and make them into animated vectors that even have sound attached to them as the same kind of tool that you can just have files full of these animated sound effect ridden vectors that you can just throw in any project anytime you want. And now you've got that. So please stay safe, keep creative. We'll see you right back here at Kid Squid Studios where it all comes together.